and maybe some craziness because I've might be a little bit over caffeinated. I also I forgot my drink, which is just water, but I may have to turn my camera up for a second to go grab that if I disappear. That's why this time. This is going to be exciting, though, and we have several shows. At the end, we'll talk briefly about what's coming up next. But I'm very excited for people who follow the Community Broadband Bits podcast that I do. Russ Elliot was recently a guest on there. He's now running Siskiyou Telephone. Welcome to the show, Russ.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Good to be here, and happy holidays to you and everyone.
Yes, and Russ is a lot of formers that we can talk about. Most recently, former head of the Washington State Broadband Office, where he did all of the hard work to set them up for success to distribute $1 billion, and now he's moved to Northern California to work for a small independent telephone company. It's pretty exciting. We also have Casey Irving joining us. Casey comes to us from Deeply Clear Networks Digital.
A mashup of all the company names.
I love mangling names from two firms, Deeply Digital that builds fiber networks and Clear Networks that operates on networks. And Casey has been on some of the Community Broadband Bits podcasts in the past, and even pinch hit for me when I had to abandon a panel at Mountain Connect earlier in the summer. So welcome,
yeah,
Casey.
Second string for Podcast House. Thanks for having me, guys.
And so Russ actually did some work in the Western Slope, where Casey's been spending all of his time working, and so I figured that we would have both of them on to talk about the challenges of building in extremely not just rural but rocky and challenging, very low density environments. As usual, we have Travis Carter back. Travis, welcome.
You too, Chris. Sorry I missed you at the volleyball game. I ran out. I thought you weren't there. So
yeah, no. Stanford hired me to shoot both games, so I was there. But apparently, I don't know if I lost weight or gained weight. If you didn't see me running around, but I must have looked a little different.
We saw your doppelganger there, so we did see somebody that looked like you. But
yes, yeah, and I don't think he would be flattered by that. But exciting times as we go through the NCAA tournament for women's volleyball, and encourage people to check it out if you haven't seen it before on ESPN. But it's exciting. Every point is exciting. But today we're going to start with, I guess I should introduce myself for people who are not familiar, but ILSR is the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, where I run the broadband program and try to help the industry move forward, whether that's municipal networks that we're very supportive of, public-private partnerships, locally rooted providers, generally trying to find ways to make sure people have high-quality internet access. So we're going to do Telecom Peekaboo very briefly this time. And this is one that I shot myself, I believe.
Ooh, what do we got?
I think we got the start of a slideshow. So we're still working out the kinks here because I think that's the same photo. But this is, I wonder if anyone can guess where this is, because I thought it was so cool that they did this, and it might be controversial among some audiences. Any thoughts?
Casey, what do you think?
I mean, are we looking at like some sort of like 5G cell or something like that? Looks pretty small, but
yeah,
it's quite small.
I have no idea. It's probably in a national forest somewhere where it's not supposed to be, and you didn't get a permit.
It's actually in Minnesota State Park, Vermilion, I believe, in which my wife's going to kill me if I got that wrong. She works for the Department of Natural Resources. But they were made in an effort to really bring Wi-Fi to the parks and allow people to sort of experience them with their devices and things like that. And I thought it was kind of cool. They painted it brown. They kept it small. And if you zoom in...
You have two different things here, though. So if you go back...
Yeah, they're next to each other.
Yeah, you've got one that looks like it is the Wi-Fi access point, right?
Right. And I think that was a previous image.
Yep. And that looks like an access point. And then they must be tied into these backhaul antennas here, would be my guess.
I think so. I think they did not run fiber throughout the park.
Shame on them.
Now, if you can zoom in on the other image, I just thought it was kind of funny. If you're able to zoom in on the antenna at the top, the two that are vertical, that are at the up at, maybe we haven't figured out how to do that yet. There's a spider living up there, and
Yeah.
I was wondering if it would be a radiated super spider that if I could get it to bite me, I would turn into Spider-Man.
Did you try?
It was toward the end of the camping trip, and I think our patience was running a little thin.
Okay.
I thought no life could live where there's wireless service and signal. I thought
Yeah.
that was the end of it. I think you bring in 5G or anything like that, it just kills everything.
It could be that spider had just moved in and hasn't yet realized that it's doomed.
Right.
But but hold on. So you're out camping, you're supposed to be enjoying nature and enjoying your time away from your computer, and there's an access point right there, huh?
So here's the thing, right? Like I go camping and I still like want to like check in on things, including
Sit on your phone the whole time? Yeah.
No, not the whole time, but I like to check the weather, among other things. I like to stay in touch a little bit,
Well, at least for like emergency services, right? Like, if something happens out there, I want to be able to call someone, do something.
Yeah. Right. And on top of that, we actually weren't even camping. We were just staying near the park because it's COVID and you can't find camping spaces anywhere. They all get booked up a year in advance, and then half the people don't even bother showing up, but you can't take the site. So,
Chris, we periodically talk about all these challenges and everything with construction. One just kind of dawned on me that I don't know if we've ever discussed before. See, dark, 5 o'clock Central Time already. Yes. So we need to add that to our repertoire of issues associated with construction.
So I was asking you, Travis, with I don't know, Casey and Russ. I don't know if you're having abnormal weather, but our ground is not frozen despite some hard efforts in the last couple of days. Travis, you still have full crews out?
Yep. Well, except we're supposed to get heavy snow tomorrow, so we'll see. They're not sure if they'll be out. I envision they'll be out through Christmas.
Yeah. And so is that, I don't know, Casey, do you have to take a break when you're getting like feet of snow at a time?
We're seeing that too. So, we operate in a couple of different markets, like down here in Montrose where our headquarters is at, we can usually work throughout most of the winter. And that's partly just, we have our own in-house construction crew. Those guys are used to it. So they're willing to work through it. And as long as the ground isn't completely frozen, we can be out there. But then you get up into the mountain towns and we do have a construction season up there. So we are lacking for snow right now. I mean, the ski resorts can't open in Colorado pretty much anywhere right now. And I guess the rest of the state would probably like to see some snow, but for us, we're just glad that we've got a couple extra months, to work. That helps us get some stuff done. So.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone, Russ said before the show, I was asking you about another county near you, and I was talking with them, and they were like, yeah, we get a lot of snow at times. It makes it difficult. And I was thinking, a lot of snow? Well, I'm kind of familiar with that. And they're like, yeah, like 5 feet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting here in Northern California. I never figured I'd find myself here, but being here now, it's very similar to Southwest Colorado in that there is a lot of snow that happens here. But in the same light, you've seen the fires that are going on up here in the summers. And that's because we're not getting the moisture in the winter. Yeah. And if you can kind of see out back behind, it's a beautiful day out here today. It's a extended, beautiful, fall day out here. And unfortunately, it's just not coming like it used to. And I, did a tour of the network serving territory, which is up in the hills here in Northern California. And there's not a trace of anything that looks white, anywhere. And it's really kind of scary after coming off of the last couple of years we've come off of with regard to the wildfires and some of the droughts.
So with the darkness, Travis, do you guys just light things up, or do they knock off early? I mean, how do you handle that?
Yeah, you generally get out of there early. You don't want to,
get stuck.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want you kind of your day gets reduced. Where in the summer, we'll work till 7:30, 8 at night when it's still light out.
Yeah, if I was better prepared, I should have, Travis, had you include that. In fact, maybe I'll dig out the photo of the rock that you found.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe Casey and Russ will find that that's not even that big of a rock, but in the
I was going to say, is now our time to pull out pictures of rocks because our construct, like we can compare rock sizes.
I'm in.
So I did want to start with a couple of subjects that we'll be talking about. One we'll come to next, which is I think excitement, fears, and regarding the hopes and fears will be the next thing that we talk about. But we'll start, I think, talking about just some of the challenges that you face, and I know that Russ, you had mentioned to me in particular that you're trying to get to 2 homes in which is like $150,000. So I'm hoping that's not the norm, but just give us a sense of what it's like building in. What do you got? Like 8,000 people. Is that right?
Yeah, so we're about 2,400 square miles here, and we've got about 4,400 total homes to touch. So we're truly frontier in nature. You know, we've got less than 2 homes a square mile, and this is truly a tough place to build. And you know, the way it's worked out, this company is very much fiber focused, and we fiber fed most of the more urbanized areas. You know, urban in our territory. But those last miles now, as you start to reach out there, that middle mile can be very expensive. And you know, some of the biggest challenges we see here are, you know, that we've got to get out there deep into some areas so we can get some middle mile backhaul in to do last mile work. And in some of those regions, you know, you're rocks on down single lane highways at 8,000 feet, and you know, you're hoping nobody's coming either way, and it's costing you $90 a foot to do it, you know, and that's unheard of type numbers. You know, we're used to hearing, oh, it's $30,000 a mile, $40,000 a mile, 50,000, but we're talking big mile numbers now as we start to get out there. But we got big mile number funding coming too, so I think we need to start to keep that in perspective.
And Casey, is that sort of in line, or is that an escalation over what you have to deal with?
No, I mean, it's exactly the same. Yeah, and you're trying to build out into those rural communities. I mean, we have there's a mixture of, you know, different ground we have to deal with, but sometimes you do just find yourself just pulling rock up in all sorts of wrong places, and it sucks to deal with. I mean, it varies by community, and your hope is that, you know, you can, you know, hook up enough people that have good soil next to their house before you get to the rocky ones, and hopefully those are going to help you pay back that customer who's got, you know, a ton of rocks in their front yard.
So Travis, what should we ask here? What are we talking about in rural areas?
Well, so educate me. So Casey, what part of the country are you in? Colorado, or?
Right, we're in Western Colorado.
So what's kind of the makeup of your topography there? Is it mountainous, or is it rural, like plains? And
so we're in a very mountain region. Okay. You know, specifically where we're headquarters, we're in a valley, but, you know, about an hour in pretty much any direction, you're hitting some pretty serious mountains. Okay. So, you know, like we call it Red Mountain Pass, but it's like one of the most dangerous passes, you know, really you can travel at any time of the year, but during the winter, you know, oftentimes they shut it down just because you can't drive on it with snow. And so, you know, to go build in a community like that and try and put fiber in the ground is, it's not super easy. So what we'll do a lot of the times is winter months, we'll come down into the valley, try and work there. And then summer months, we'll try and be up in those mountain towns, get as much as we can done, but mostly mountains.
Are you predominantly underground, or do you do aerial plant as well?
We'll do both, but, you know, wherever we can, especially for like any middle mile or, you know, really core infrastructure, we try and put it underground. It really just depends, you know, how fast we can deploy it. I think ultimately we'd like to get everything underground, but if it's cheaper to deploy aerial, then sometimes we'll do that with the purpose of putting it underground maybe in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay. And
I know that Russ can't really go above ground because of fires. What do you face, Casey? Why wouldn't you put everything above ground? Is there like a threat, or is it just a cost or issue or overhead issue?
Cost is a big thing. It's just, you know, it's a lot to maintain that fiber. There's all sorts of things that can happen. You know, the fiber gets hit with a dump truck. Some guy who's, you know, driving and has his dump truck lifted up, that aerial fiber gets taken out. You know, obviously that's a big deal. You know, fires are a big thing in our region. Just, you know, bad poles, the pole attachment fees though can easily kill you. And I think that's pretty scary for us, especially for when we're dealing with so many different, you know, utility providers and different pole owners. The fee structure is so different. So one, it makes sense, and others, it's, you know, so hard to I guess gauge that.
I see a lot of head nodding from Russ.
Yeah, no question. You know, that was one of the big things just from my experience in Washington. You know, we had a lot of people that wanted to do more broadband and wanted to do more fiber construction above ground because it is less expensive if you can do it. But the pole attachment agreements, the leases, the fees, the uncertainties, you know, and the deregulation of some, you know, the unregulation of some of that stuff is really challenging for providers to do good work in that space.
Yeah. The other thing that comes up too is, like, you know, these are mountain towns, so they're tourist areas, and a lot of those municipalities don't like poles. And so some of them might have regulations in place to prohibit us from putting stuff up, or, you know, the potential like, hey, I may throw it up on poles this year, but in 2 years, they're going to tell you have to go put it all underground. So
Right.
That's why we've leveraged our own in-house construction, because sometimes we can almost make it as cheap to put it underground, and then it's obviously going to last a lot longer. You have to deal with a lot less risk in that case.
And in that area, in those topographies, are you directionally boring everything? Or are you open?
Not everything. Some communities we have to, because they'll require it. But wherever we can trench, wherever we can save costs, we'll trench or plow or whatever the municipality or county will allow us.
Got it.
Travis?
Hey, I got thousands of questions.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping you do.
So are you guys considered underserved in the areas that you guys serve currently? So have you been able to take advantage of a lot of these federal and state grant programs that are available? And if you have, how challenging are they? Because it's one thing I think we don't talk about very often on this podcast here is just the logistics of what it takes to go through these programs and the mountains of paperwork to go through them that before you get your first dollar, and how that all works. And then how do banks look at that too, for getting additional financing? So I don't know, Russ, you're probably the expert in this because you were running the broadband out of Washington, right? Is it if you're an upstart ISP looking to serve your area, is it worth the effort?
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, I've had a lot of experience with the USDA program. Obviously, probably the most prevalent with regards to infrastructure funding and broadband. When you get the Reconnect or Community Connect or one of the programs they have there, and almost unanimously, the people that are successful in that space have expressed concern about that process, the lengthiness it takes to go through the application, and then really at the end, the time it takes to get paid. There's a lot of concern with regard to getting paid in a timely fashion after you've already made all these expenses. So there is some challenge there. And I think that needs to be addressed at the federal level to where there is a little bit more leniency. With regard to state funds and those kind of things, that money still has yet to kind of hit the ground a little bit in this last CARES Act fund. Some of these states got a little bit more aggressive, and kudos to them for doing that. And those funds are a little bit easier to access and a little bit more ready to get. And I think Colorado's done some of that. I've seen some work there out of the broadband office there, and Wyoming, obviously, but that money's still yet to really get flowing here. And I think you'll see the states will probably make that process a lot more streamlined.
I mean, historically, has it been worth the effort for companies? Because, Chris always talks about how the big guys get it, the high percentage of the available money. And I wonder if it's just they can hire people to sit there and do this all day. But if you're a small operator like the rest of us, is it really worth the additional expense? And how do banks look at it? Is it realistic supplemental financing that you can leverage against, or do they look at it as a potential liability because you don't know when you're going to get paid?
Go ahead, Casey.
Man, I could go down a rabbit hole. I mean, we're a small company, and we're completely privately owned and funded. So for us to go make fiber investments and to try and build out rural communities, it is so hard. And I mean, you almost have to with grants, I feel like, because, it's as close as you can get to free money. And unfortunately, the banks in our experience have been really difficult to explain what we're trying to do, the security and hooking up and building fiber customers, and then just the long term, that it takes to hook up that customer, but then pay for the fiber build, especially in a rural community where there's not a lot of density. So banks have been slow to understand and maybe get what we're trying to do or why it's, it'll work in the end. And we've really struggled with that. So we've had to focus on grants. That's had to been a focus of ours. Or even just finding people in the industry who are interested in investing and trying to work with them on, just creative funding sources. Even, with the ARPA dollars coming down into the counties, approaching the counties and trying to, help them with, hey, we've got some cool programs we'd love to work with you on, because maybe the state or the federal level has a ton of paperwork, but I could go directly to the county and they're getting $8 million. And maybe I can tell you how to spend $2 million of that to hook up a lot of people with broadband.
Okay, that's something that we actually talked about, Travis, on a show that I think if you went back and listened to again, you'd probably recognize Casey's voice. And for people, I put a link in the chat but the first time that they went through the process of getting money, it was a nightmare because they weren't sure what to expect and everything else. And then in the end, it literally CenturyLink took the money away from them and then used it to build. They didn't get as much money, but they went through all this effort to get money for a community, and then CenturyLink ended up getting money instead and building a crap solution.
What a terrible experience.
Maybe not even doing that. Maybe CenturyLink didn't even do that actually, though. I mean, like they didn't actually, they just took the money and ran. Who knows? Like,
it's crazy. It took us about a year to heal from that like experience, because we were convinced after that point, why go after grants? We did all this work, and really what we did at the end is we wrote this really cool application to hand all that millions of dollars, well, I think it was close to $1 million of funding, to our competitor. And that was crazy to us. And thankfully, there was some changes in the legislation and how that process worked a little bit. And there's still a lot of frustrations. But yeah, I think, you know, we've put a focus on grant funding because we recognize it's probably one of the cheapest ways to build broadband.
Well, and one of the things I think you've done that's worked well, Casey, is you went to the schools. And again, we talk about this in the podcast some, and that's what we were talking about at Mountain Connect and the panel we put together, where I think the schools got a pot of money. And they were like, well, we'd like to connect kids, but we don't know anything about how to do this. And you saw that number of places, I would say the schools were kind of getting suckered maybe. And you said, you know what, like we could work with the schools if they want to partner with us. We'll use that money to like get free connections out. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what you ended up working out there.
It's great. I mean, that's been, you know, probably the most creative we've ever gotten with funding. But basically, you know, Colorado took a bunch of money that was coming in through CARES Act, and part of that money went to the Colorado Department of Education, and it was for the purpose of trying to connect students, and that could be used in a myriad of ways. And for whatever reason, the focus and the main point that was being made by, I feel like most schools or most legislators was, go buy hotspots. Why? Like, there's millions of dollars of funding. Go build fiber. Go build something that you can connect people with. So we thought it was crazy. So we approached our schools and said, if you write the grant, we'll help you with all the data. We'll say we're going to go build into these underserved areas, these financially challenged areas, because they were being overlooked by service providers. And we'll take that money, we'll go deploy the infrastructure, and then we'll match it with cost savings. So we'll set up these programs that basically offer free internet for free and reduced lunch students, and then we'll offer $10 monthly discounts and free installations to all other students and staff members. And it was great. It worked well. I mean, we're wrapping up deploying a lot of that fiber, and we worked with 3 school districts, and now it's to the point where, even with, private investors or impact investors, we're interested in that program enough to where we're expanding it to, other markets, and we're using that as a mechanism to go into places like Delta or, some of the other markets we're looking at to build fiber service even in underserved communities, and then match that with, cost savings for maybe financially challenged households.
Now, Russ, I'm curious if sort of the years that you were out of the game of actually directly running networks and things, were you really excited to get back into it? Are there things that you're just really excited to be doing now that you're actually in charge of wires again?
Yeah, for me, it's being back into the community like Casey's talking about. The more you could do that, my background is in Casey's territory. Back when Casey was a baby, I was providing service all across Western Colorado and driving over Red Mountain Pass when it had 18 inches of snow on it in my excursion, and putting life in everybody in the hands of whoever was watching over us at the time. But we were running all around that, and I love that because you really, as you do that community work, you get endeared with those communities. Those communities really appreciate that, and it just feels such good work. And to be back now in a small rural community where I have that opportunity to give back in this way is really been a big win for me. And public service is not for everybody. That running those broadband offices and being in the government of this business, it's a challenge. That's a big lift. We talked about that last time, Chris. It's a challenge. So it's good to be back in this.
Yeah, I wonder if we could get a reality show, Travis, you and me running a broadband program somewhere in government.
Oh, they wouldn't like that because you'd make sure that people were actually delivering. I love that guy you had on the podcast last week. That's like, we've already spent enough money to hook everybody up. Why we
John Chambers?
It was freaking fabulous. So do you think if we spend the money again, it'll happen this time around? And that's my worry on this is, put it in Russ and Casey's hands, people are going to get hooked up. But what about the rest of the country?
Well, Travis, I mean, I feel like people have an unrealistic expectation. The first time you do anything as a business, I'll bet it sucks, right? Like you learn from it. And now there's a lot of like, I mean, anyone could have told you 7 years ago that giving AT&T billions of dollars was not a good plan. But we have at least moved on from it, and we're hopefully not going to do it again. AT&T now has to go to states to get that money.
Yeah. Okay. But now, so all this new money that they're printing comes out for broadband. How does it get into Casey and Russ's hands?
Russ is the perfect person to ask for that.
Easily, without, and where you can leverage it to build out and actually serve people. Because has that process changed?
Yeah, it's a great question, Travis, because that's right where we're at right now. All this money's starting to get ready to flow, and states are allocating it pre to having it, right? So they're getting ready to allocate. Legislators are putting that money out there, and they're saying, okay, go. And now the programs are getting set up, and those programs need to come exactly with what you guys just said. And it was a big point of mine in Washington State. Accountability. We've got to make certain that if you give money out, that infrastructure is being built, there's milestones being met. And if not, we need to pull the funding quicker and sooner, and make certain that we're getting people to do the work they say they're going to do. But the answer right now is we've got to be working with our state legislators. We've got to be working with our county officials, and just the different officials to ensure that money is going where it's intended to go. This isn't the time to be serving the served already. This isn't the time where the big counties and the big urban areas get extra money for broadband. Certainly for the affordability component of it, yes, everybody's going to be in that game. But this infrastructure money is specifically for these areas that will never, ever in our lifetime get served unless we allocate these funds correctly right now. So we need to make certain to get to those hands of those people that have a reputation of successful deployment.
So how do we know who are the haves and who are the have-nots right now?
I think it's by you've got to prove it. It's a show me. Let's all be Missouri for a while. It's the show me time. You got to show me infrastructure you've done. You've got to show me good work, and the people have to be speaking kindly of you. You can't just go in there and talk about yourself as great.
Yeah,
right.
Yep.
That's arrogance. It's reverence when the people talk about you. So it should be the people in service territory, the people that you've served should be your testimony to these guys are good people and they're doing good work. I think we should include broadband as a community up discussion now. It is no longer a provider down driven conversation, and we need to allow communities to have some say in this thing.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think the challenge is how one goes about doing that. Because for instance, I got to think that if there's real community engagement, there's no way that AT&T gets another dollar in Mississippi. There's no way that Frontier gets another dollar in West Virginia. But the problem is that if states basically ask, certain counties and local governments, those folks are just going to sort of pick the wrong entity to partner with potentially. I know that in Washington, Russ, there's a preference, like the counties basically have extra points for who they choose to work with, right? That's in the current process that's going through. Yeah. My understanding is some of the counties didn't really have a good sense of how to make a good decision.
They didn't, and I think that's incumbent on these state officials to start to set these people up for success. That county planning is critical right now. You can't do anything without planning, without understanding where you're going to put the dollars. And so that's where the broadband office in Washington State was really going down the pathway of providing the resources for these counties to be successful. Right? You can't just assume, especially Wyoming. You think about some of the counties I was dealing with there, population of 6, you can't expect them to lead that conversation. So you have to have some folks that are going to be there to help guide the way, help establish the process, and make certain that they're assisting and making certain their success in that program.
Are there really 6 people in multiple counties in Wyoming?
No, I'm going to get shot for saying that. But there were some towns with 4. There were a couple of towns with 4.
Wow.
Lost Springs.
Can you imagine even trying to serve them though? Even if you got the dollars for free, you still have to serve them for the next 30 years. So doing utility locates, doing break fix, for 6 people, I don't know. I might pass on those dollars. So, I guess I'm curious though. Like in Colorado, Casey, do you think the state has a good handle on the haves and have-nots in your state? And because I keep hearing like in Minnesota, this mapping, I went back like 10 years on this Minnesota broadband group and I started watching their meetings. They were talking about mapping 10 years ago and they're still talking about mapping today. And this mapping is going to drive the decisions on where to place these dollars. So I guess I'm concerned if the maps are invalid, how are we going to navigate our way to the proper destination?
That's really tough. I wish I could answer that question for you, because I sympathize. When we apply for grants with the state, we have good and we have bad experiences. And a lot of those are related to maps and to maybe inconsistency in how boards make decisions, or even just, changes in the board. There's not a lot of experience happening there. But I sympathize with, those guys who have to sit on those boards, because some of them are providers, some of them are from public sector. I really believe, a lot of those guys want to make the right decisions when it comes to broadband, but how do you do that? Unless you're from that area and you have immense knowledge and background on both telecom and the rural area and how you would go about serving that. The mapping that's in Colorado, they try really hard, and I think everyone knows that it still does not hit the mark. I mean, that's a regular conversation amongst people in the state is, hey, we have a cool map, but not everyone really believes that it's accurate. And so they always put the burden on the provider. Hey, you need to prove that service is not available here, which is tough, but where do you draw that line? Like Russ is saying, like, you need to prove that, the provider has to put some work into it. And so we feel like we go out and collect speed tests, and to an extent that puts us in good standing with the community, because we'll go out there and get 130 speed tests for an area, and those guys are all excited about it. And we say, hey, let's make this a community project. Don't assume that we're just going to come build it because we have the dollars. We need your help too, and you got to be a part of this. So it puts us in that position, and it makes us more of a community provider than just someone who's got funding and is going to build where it makes the most sense. But I don't know how to answer your question right there.
Well, I think mapping is okay, go for it, Russ.
I do. Mapping is near and dear to my heart. That's one of the things, Travis, as I was in Wyoming, the first thing I thought is, I can't do anything until I know where people are and what's going on and what they have and what technology it is. So I developed a compelling map in Wyoming that allowed the people to tell me the story, not the providers, not anybody guessing, but I allowed them to tell the story. And then I partnered with a group in Washington State. I think Chris knows these folks really well, the Geo Partners Group, and we put together a citizens broadband map that allowed the people to tell the story. Now the providers kick back and say, well, no, wait a second, they didn't take my highest level speed, or wait, they might have crummy routers in their house. Yeah, but I was never looking for a one-off. I was looking for trends. And when I spotted trends because of my industry understanding and my technology understanding, I could sit there and say, you've got oversubscribed DSL services here. It's copper infrastructure. It will never make the 100 by 100 symmetrical goals that we've set ourselves up for in these regions. So we need to lift in place. Who's going to do it? Incumbent, are you going to do it? If not, who's next? Is it a community network? Is it a competitor like Casey's team? Who is it going to be? But I think you have to allow the citizens to have a voice in this thing. And I think, you can't quantify it until you qualify it, right? And so, people that sit back and say my broadband sucks, you can't measure that. We should have a whole show on mapping one day. I think that would be a good one. I think what we have to do is talk about, quantify that conversation, quantify that description to me. What is sucks? And then they could go on, they do the speed test, I get something, I understand, okay, this is a ballpark of what they got there. I know what it is, and we could start to have a little bit more of a conversation. But at a time we're talking symmetrical, I think it's really simple right now to start to do some maps and do some speed testing with reliable speed test, components. And one last thing before I know I get crazy on this thing.
Love the energy.
But I'm going to tell you too that there's not a silver bullet. I don't care if you spend $95 million with the group in Seattle for FCC to do their map, or if the other group with the Zillow group wants to think they've got a better $45 million solution. The truth is, it's going to be this and this and this. It's not this or this. It's going to be a combination of how we can get that data to the best place it can be. Mm-hmm. And to Casey's point, he's grabbing a little information, the community's grabbing a little information, state has a little information. Now we're better educated, and we can start to talk more intelligently about where it is the problems are and how we're going to solve them. We're going to put our emphasis. Thank you.
Now, I want to say something regarding the mapping, and I feel like I'm curious how Casey and Russ particularly respond, because I feel like mapping is a double-edged sword for both of you, in that certain kinds of maps might suggest that the government would give money to a competitor to come in and compete with you, which obviously you would prefer not to happen. Again, and different ISPs have different levels of horror at the prospects of that, with some saying, I'm pretty confident I do a good job. But I feel that the focus on mapping comes largely from the fear that we might accidentally give money to a company that would bring competition to CenturyLink, and that would be unfair. or AT&T, and that fundamentally we spend the majority of the complexity of these subsidy programs and the complexity of the mapping, that we can't accept a basically good map. We have to have the perfect map, is because we couldn't possibly accidentally create some competition. That's what it seems to come down to for me. And I don't know if I'm overstating that or not.
We couldn't, we just went through a process this last year, spending $9 million on a crappy mapped, process and RDOF. You allocated funds before you knew where they needed to go. Shame on the way that played out.
Sorry, were you just saying that that's what people are saying, or that is legitimate, that the RDOF should have been delayed?
I think RDOF, I'm on record. I wrote an op-ed and sent it to Chairman Pai. I actually had Chairman Pai on a Zoom meeting with a community in Washington to show him that his maps were completely wrong, and that we were excluded from getting good funds into areas that needed it most desperately because his maps weren't not correct. And they had $20 billion. They were all excited about moving that money, and and then they move it and they give it to satellite technology or whatever again. And it just, to me, it's just, again, it's politically driven, not driven by common sense.
So Casey, similar, is there any point in your running an ISP where you're like, dang, I wish there was better maps?
I mean, absolutely. Part of that, we've had to take on our own selves. Like, we figured out pretty early on, we need to have our own GIS team, because we need to put together the maps, and we need to collect the data, and we need to consolidate all this information into something that is visualized and presentable to people who have the ability to give us money. So that was, we had to go take that work. I wish it would be easier and we didn't have to spend tons of time, tons of resources, tons of money on that, and instead someone else had that solution, especially if they're the one handing out the dollars. But that's unfortunately not the way it works. And so we got to be a participant in that, and we got to go collect that data and submit it at the end of the day.
So we had a really great question in the chat, which I want to direct toward Casey in particular, because I know that you're building in a lot of different areas. Are there times when you basically can't build because you don't have middle mile? You can't get back to somewhere? You mentioned that you do build your own middle mile, but like, how much is middle mile really slowing you down?
Oh, it slows us down, and it's not necessarily always because it's not available. It's like, who owns that middle mile, and are they easy to work with, or are they inexpensive sometimes? We helped Region 10 build a circuit from Montrose to Ouray, about 42 miles, in the time it took basically the incumbent carrier who has circuits to Ouray. We built that in a 2-year process, and we got that done before we could get the incumbent carrier to basically upgrade their switch so that we could get gigabit circuit in Ouray and start serving the town. So that's where we struggle. And we have to go sometimes build those solutions faster than we can get those guys to cooperate or work with us, or just even upgrade circuit equipment. We have a town just on the other side of Red Mountain Pass that their circuit equipment that the town was fed by was plugged into our battery backup for the longest time, because their battery backup died, and they didn't even know they had a circuit there. I guess we kept telling them, you guys need to come replace your battery backup, and they didn't. So
national company, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I'm trying not to name names, but
yeah, no,
obviously it's a frustration.
Whatever you feel comfortable with, I think that's appropriate.
So it's a struggle for us. Sometimes we have to be that solution. We got to go build the middle mile. We got to partner with the community and, help them build it in some way. We're lucky enough to have people like Region 10 who are willing to work with companies like us and figure out how to get it done. Whether that's we build the fiber and they IRU strands, or we help them build the fiber and they provide us, the way to get into that community for low cost. So that's something we struggle with every day. But yeah, it's an issue, especially in the mountain towns. Like, no one wants to go build over the mountain pass over, some dangerous highway to get into that small town where there's not a lot of density. You don't have a lot of providers purchasing circuits there. So, we got to build it because we want to service the last mile. Not anyone else really is incentivized to go do that.
Yeah, I want to give this back to Travis to let him ask some questions, but I want to note also, we haven't really fully explained how hard it is to build in the high elevation mountain towns. Because I know a little bit about Allo building in Breckenridge, and had a sense that with Breckenridge, you have a situation where you can't be there on the weekends. You've got a very tight construction window in which you can work, for like 12 weeks of the year or something like that. And then you have to basically spend Monday setting up and Friday breaking down. And so you have like only a like a limited number of days per year in which you can work. I mean, it makes it luxurious to be in a place like Minnesota by comparison.
It's awful. I mean, it's, the mountain towns, you're doing that and you're tearing up these nice roads. In some cases you can't board because the municipality won't let you. There's too many utilities. They're scared you're going to hit something, so that you have to do asphalt cuts. And that's where, even in last mile situations, I'm just trying to build down this alleyway. It's $90 per foot to put fiber in the ground to go hook customers up, and it's crazy. Then you got to deal with the people who live there and are upset that you're tearing up their roadway and they can't access their driveway for a day or two. So it's awful. It's and there's challenges across the board, I'm sure, with building fiber. Obviously we don't love doing it in the mountain towns, but the best way we could figure out to do it was we hired and built our own construction crew, because no one else would go do it. You would go approach a subcontractor, hey, we'd really like to build out this mountain town. They go, no way, either that or I'm going to charge you like $125 per foot. So the only way to get it done really is to leverage your own guys and to have guys that are really experienced and really committed to just serving everyone, not just who's easiest to hook up.
Let's come back to that question from Joel. Travis, do you want to ask a question quick before you do that?
Well, I was just pondering what we were talking about here, and there's a couple of good comments in the chat about all this statistical data. And I think Russ said something that really piqued my interest, is quality as well. So all right, let if you're running with a 1.0 Google star rating, or if you're on Nextdoor and people are complaining nonstop about your service, should we be giving those operators additional dollars, taxpayer dollars, to continue the trend that they're already continuing? So it makes me wonder. We're always like speed. And the problem with speed is we can all argue about that forever. They didn't get my package, their router sucks, all these type of issues. But what they can't get away from? If you've got 300 one-star ratings because your customer service is terrible, that's a trend. And should they be authorized to get additional dollars? So I kind of like the idea of, all right, the area is underserved by our pseudo maps, but boy, Casey's running with a 4.5 Google star rating. He should get $4.50 for every dollar the one-star guy gets. That's my new. I'm going to champion that idea now.
You go ahead until Casey.
It's all driven by customer service.
Casey needs to put some people in Denver.
Yeah.
If he wants to get more money.
No, I love the idea, because that's something we struggle with and I feel like that partly comes down to not just the issue with building in a rural area, but the issue with operating in a rural area. Like, no one talks about how when your switch goes down on the other side of a mountain pass, you got to drive the 2 hours to go reboot that. And that's how a lot of these carriers are set up, is like, hey, I got a couple employees in a strategic area to where I can go service this. But when that mountain pass is shut down, those customers are just down until it opens back up and you can get over there. So we have to accept that our operational costs are going to be higher, because I need to make sure that those people have the same level of service and that they have someone in their town who's available to go down there, reboot a switch, help a customer get a router plugged back in correctly. And our operational costs are a lot higher because of those reasons, but we're willing to do that because we want to be the local provider. And the only way you can be the local provider is if you are able to offer the same level of service, in really every market you're touching.
All right. So I'm going to champion the Russ score, 1 to 5, right? And so everybody gets $1 for every point you have over 250 reviews. So that's our new thing.
Travis, I couldn't agree more with you. As the state guy, for when I was in Washington, I had to pick winners and losers, and a lot of that has to come down to quality of service. And you do hear that from those communities. Again, if we bring the conversation back to the community will bring the regulation. Chris and I had this conversation before. As a small incumbent in a rural community, I'm more regulated by the people in this community than I am by the federal and state government.
That's it.
These people every day are seeing me at the restaurant or at church, at the schools, picking up my kid, and they're like, hey, what's going on? And it was the same thing when I was in Colorado. So, it's
new guy, fix my internet.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the competitors, Casey and I are different. I'm an incumbent. He's a competitor, right? So as competitors, they have to fight for that because they have to go down that pathway. As an incumbent, some incumbents get lazy. especially some of the bigger ones, and you see that, and that, you're seeing more and more of that, and it's going to have a tremendous impact on how this, how I think it should have a tremendous impact on how dollars are allocated. So I'm championing the Travis 5-star money for stars.
I love it. Joel actually made, I think, probably the most wise statement in the chat, where he basically said nobody gets fired for buying IBM. That old analogy in technology. So here's the reality. If you're a city manager and you got a few $1 million of CARES funds, giving it to Comcast, you don't lose your job. Right. That's it. You're fine. You move on. CenturyLink isn't going to complain about it. Comcast is going to indemnify you. And so they're not going to fight over it. You still have your job to move on to the next day. Why would you champion bringing the young, the new guys in and give them the cash? You just open yourself up for all kinds of problems.
There's a really good comment noting, and Travis, you would get hit by this in particular. If you went by your reviews to USI Wireless, it might be a different story than if you go by the reviews to USI Fiber.
Oh no, I understand. That's why how I said 5G was not the competitor. Wireless is terrible technology. It's good, like if you have to get in somewhere or if you have line of sight, but trying to do it in an urban setting like we do, no, not good.
So I just want to take a second, because I've been pissing off the wireless guys a lot lately. The wireless folks lately. And I want to know, Casey, wireless is a part of your strategy. So why don't you just give us a sense of how you use it?
Yeah. Fiber is expensive. I don't know if everyone knows that, but it's very expensive, as we found. And so to go deploy that everywhere today or even next year is obviously impossible. But there are people who don't have broadband today that I would like to get them at least something until we can build fiber out to them. And really, it's a strong revenue source for us to afford to be able to build fiber to them in the future. So, we try and build fiber into the density areas. And just, I say density areas, I mean, we're talking, communities that are 400 serviceable addresses, sometimes less. I mean, we built in Redville, Colorado, and I'm pretty sure there's 16 serviceable addresses there. And we built fiber to the home. But what we did first was we built fiber into the community. I got the towers hooked up with fiber, and then I fed fixed wireless throughout it. And we were able to do, our LTE wireless package, which we can get 75 megs, download 25 megs, upload on that. And we can get it out into the community. And this was an area that people were previously with CenturyLink or with the current fixed wireless provider were getting maybe 3 megabits per second. If they're lucky, maybe 5 megabits per second on download. And so to have 75 megs is, that's great. And those guys are loving that. I would love to get them fiber because, and that's what we're doing. Eventually we're building off of the middle mile. We're connecting those homes along the route and we're getting them fiber, but it just takes time and it takes money. And until either I have a grant or we can fund that ourselves, it's not a super easy task.
But it's a great use for wireless there.
Yeah.
And your fiber fed, right?
Correct. Yeah. And the other thing is, that was important to us is we don't sell it as the end all solution to either customers or the municipalities we're working with. Like, hey, this is great, but don't get stuck on this. Like, don't assume, your 75 meg upgrade is fantastic, but we're here to build fiber. And so don't lose focus. Don't start going, our broadband problem solved. We can work on other things. Let's get fiber. Let's get something future proof, because in the next year or two, 75 megs isn't going to cut it. I mean, it really almost to an extent doesn't cut it now, but to that guy who had 2 megs, he is stoked to have 75 megs.
What band are you operating in?
5 gigahertz.
Okay. See, every show I have to make my little nudge to Mr. Mitchell here about how well the Trump's FCC did, opening up the 6 gigahertz band, which I think will be a game changer for wireless, outdoor wireless. So, good job.
And we've considered, once we build out the area with fiber, what are the other ways we can utilize wireless? And we're, considering and talking that through now, because we could just shut down all the wireless towers, but we also think that there's a way to tackle maybe even affordability in some cases, like with the school program we're doing. There are some really rural areas that we're maybe not trying to build fiber out to now, but I could, instantly turn up a wireless circuit, try and get some wireless out into the community. And I can do that for fairly low cost to try and get some students connected for maybe like, a student program or something like that. So, there's other ways to utilize it too, just beyond the speed impacts or something like that. But there's a cost side that, I don't have a huge bill to pay back. So I may be able to offer a lot lower cost. And some people that's super appetizing too, is I would like cheap internet that works well and is reliable.
So I want to throw this at you, Casey. This the question about what are you running on the middle mile, coming to us from Reed, a former guest on the show. And I don't know if you want to also tackle that, Russ, because I'm sure you're running some middle mile yourself.
I can let Russ go first. I've been talking so much.
I don't want to go first on this one. This is not my wheelhouse. I'd have to have my engineers here to talk about what we're running on the glass. We're doing all backhaul. We are working with the state on a middle mile project here. As you know, California's allocated $6 billion to broadband. 3.5 of that is going to middle mile. We're in initial conversations right now doing some middle mile work through our service territory so the state can have some middle mile access across our service territory. So, we're looking at selling them dark fiber, and letting them have at it, and go through it. But I don't, as far as the technology, I'd have to defer to somebody's got.
Chris, I feel so guilty. I gave Reed a compliment. I didn't know it was him. Oh, no. I'll never hear the end of this now.
And yes, great point, Reed. Future guests, deep future. No, I'm just kidding. Casey, did you have any answer to that, or is it a little bit beyond what you are focused on?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're just building fiber. We're putting fiber in the ground because it's a future-proof solution. As far as the equipment we put on either end, it's really dependent on what the community needs at that time, and we'll upgrade it as needed. Like we've already had communities, we put the fiber in, and that's great because I can go virtually to anything I need whenever I need it. But for the meantime, maybe they only need a 1 gig solution, 10 gig solution. We upgrade, pretty quickly based on capacity. But we'll always have enough as long as the fiber's in the ground. Now,
Russ, I'm curious. If I asked you, what is a nightmare scenario for the middle mile that California is working on? Do you have a nightmare scenario of how this could go in terms of them spending all this money on the middle mile?
Yeah, I mean, it's a replication of what happened in Colorado, Wyoming, and Washington. It's deploying.
So it's you.
Yeah, it's not me. No, it's deploying middle mile to suck up anchor institutions and really screw up the economic model in those rural communities. That's why every one of those middle mile are suspect, in my opinion. So what's good about the middle mile project as it's starting here, knock on wood, that things continue down this pathway, is they're not after that anchor institution build. They're looking to actually create a middle mile highway for everybody to travel on and let folks, ISPs, incumbents, and competitors get on it and just have affordable paths in and out. So
let me just jump in though, because I've been a member of Shelby since the beginning, the Schools, Hospitals, Libraries Broadband Association. Schools, Health, Libraries Broadband Association, and I feel like they'd be like, our anchors need connections. What are you talking about? We need to connect the anchors.
Yeah, no offense, John Winhausen. I think he's a brilliant man, and I think he runs a great organization. But I think what has to happen is, and it worked for me in Brainstorm when I was in Colorado, we were able to partner with the middle mile and be the service provider of record, so that we were that local guy that got the phone call that was able to run over the pass to make certain that we service the network and take care of the folks, right? If you start to just do middle mile from someplace in Denver, Colorado, or Sacramento, or wherever you're at, you're not going to be in touch with the needs of the people in those communities. So it's imperative that these middle mile networks work with the providers in those areas to allow them to partner and help maintain those relationships they already have with the schools and libraries. I'm not against schools and libraries. I want every school and library to be hooked up. Everyone in our service territory has fiber already, so I'm great with that. The nightmare scenario is a middle mile provider comes in and builds on top of me and goes in and gets it for less, and now all of a sudden it's ruined the economic model for me, and it's going to cost everybody a little bit more because of the nature of how incumbents are structured.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. I mean, one thing that was happening a lot was with middle miles, let's just build the quickest, cheapest, and easiest route. And what we're trying to get communities to do with middle mile is let's build through the communities. Like, let's build along routes that we can actually build it into underserved areas. So when we built that route from Montrose to Ouray, we said, stop, let's not go down the highway, not go down on the poles that no houses are on. Let's build it along some of these county roads. That's going to take a little bit more money, and it's going to take a little bit more time, but I'm going to run fiber past 2,000 homes. And then let's add enough capacity to where a provider could come build off of that and actually connect those homes. And that's what we're trying to do right now. So we built the middle mile with, DOLA state funds. And now we're trying to go back to the state and say, hey, these underserved communities, there's a middle mile circuit running through it right now. There's fiber, there's excess capacity. The people who own this, would love to give us that capacity. We just need some grant dollars to go build it out last mile into the community and hook those people up. So stop just building the easiest route. Maybe if you can spend a little bit extra money, build past some people and hook people up along the way. That's best case scenario. Then you really get it out into the rural communities. It's impossible for a provider to do that on their own dime, especially a local one, especially a private one. But if they can partner with the community and they can build this middle mile route, get some extra connectivity into the density areas, they can also build it through the really rural areas and get fiber to the premise out into these areas you would never imagine to.
Well, I'm just, I think that's great. I mean, I haven't heard people talk about like that before. I did have a question that I wanted to ask earlier. You just reminded me of, which is just like, it's perfect me to take such a great point and go to those. You ever have any elk attacks? Like what's it like? Do you have any crazy animal stories building in these super rural areas?
Can I ask a follow-up question? Like, what triggered that? Like, where's that?
You were talking earlier about building up these mountain passes and stuff like that, and like a friend of mine hunts elk up there regularly, and I was like, these things are scary. Like
elk attack. They're vicious. We've got rogue elk attacking right now. Is that what's going on?
I mean, there's like mountain lions in an area we're trying to build right now. Like, that would be the closest thing I could attribute to it. But I don't think that there's like too many elk or like even an animal that would come up to a very loud boar machine and, try and attack it. So I think our guys are fairly safe.
I was trying to wonder because I know Travis has problems where sometimes in some neighborhoods his crews have been threatened by human beings. I was going to say.
So that would be the closest I could come to it, is like someone coming out with like a shotgun or something and, trying to threaten the crew member, but
not elk attacks. All right.
No elk attacks.
So Casey, who's in charge of all this cash in your state then? You need to get in front of them because you have a 5 Russ score right now. So they should give you all kinds of cash to get that deployed.
We try. I mean, I don't know. We're a small local company. We don't know how to lobby or how to talk to those guys, necessarily all the time. But we try and work through our local guys. So there are people who want to build broadband here as well, and it's the local communities. We try and convince them of how we'd like to do it and how we can offer them an insurance policy. Hey, we get it's scary to work with some guy who's basically asking for millions of dollars, but can I give you some insurance? So that, in case you don't like us in the future or we didn't do what we, promised to do, you have some fiber at the end that you can maybe incentivize the next guy to come in with. So we do it on the local level, and then on the state level, that's just any talk we can be invited to like this. We'd love to do it. We love talking about broadband. We're happy to talk about it with anyone. And there's people at the state who we've gotten to know a little bit just because, we're trying to explain our ideas like, hey, let's do it this way. This is great. And also just project recognition, some of the things that we're doing with our local guys. I think, people are starting to notice some of that stuff and go, oh, that's a unique way to think about it. Like the middle mile, like let's build middle mile with a lot of capacity so we can hook up people along the way. And we're starting to do that in some communities. And I think hopefully people are starting to take notice. And then, hopefully the next time someone asks the question, well, where do you want to send money in the state? They can go, well, any project that wants to build it like this, that's a great idea. We should do something like that.
Yeah, I think, Travis, just to answer that real quickly too, I think you have to know where the money's getting put. This money's getting allocated, it goes to the states and the states then allocate it from there. Whether they give it to the state broadband offices, they give it to the counties, they give it to the Department of Local Affairs in Colorado, they give it to, they give it to all sorts of the Department of Technology here in California. You have to know where the money's going to go. And then you're going to have to work those angles. You have to be there to tell them why, I built a little, the first thing I did when I came here was built a little sheet that talks about Siskiyou Telephone, the challenges of building in the area, and it's all the talking points that I want to control the conversation. I want to tell them why putting money here is a good investment for the state of California, so that when that money starts to get allocated, they think about us. I think it's just a matter of getting in front of the right people as they start to have, the ability to distribute those funds.
Nice.
Yeah.
Travis, we're running out of time. Any last questions you want to pump out?
No, I'm rooting for you guys. Hopefully some of these tax dollars will go your way. So it sounds like you guys are doing good work. And Chris, you should find out who these people are so we can talk. Actually, you know what? I do have one thing, because I always give the government a hard time on everything they do. But I was listening to, what's her name? Our Senator Klobuchar give a conversation on a podcast. And you know what? I was pretty darn impressed on how good of a handle she had on this. And it actually sounded like there was going to be a lot of good things that come out of this. but I was really surprised at the timing. Like, I thought this was going to be like tomorrow. I mean, no, she's like, this could be 3, 4, 5 years out, some of these programs. So if you're a small operator like Casey, don't assume this is coming tomorrow. You know, build your business model around the fact that you might not see these dollars for 48 to 60 months.
Well, at the same time, I mean, Russ, you can give us a sense of how you did in Washington, but I feel like some of these states are, whether it's rescue plan dollars or other things that are available. There was CARES Act that will soon be no more, not be able to be used after the 31st of this month. But there's some states where there's like a constant cycle. And I think that's kind of what you want. You don't want a situation where you just like drop these big loads every now and then. You want to kind of like ramp up and make sure that, you know, Casey can digest it like some kind of big snake. I think like a long time ago, I did the whole thing about like an animal moving moving through the snake, the gerbil or something like that. And people didn't like that so much. So I thought I would call it back. But anyway, you want that to be, you know, like moving through the process. Amy, you know, in the show that we just did that you referenced, Travis, with John Chambers, we talked specifically about the timing on the $42 billion and how it's going to be hung up on FCC mapping and stuff like that. So I would recommend people check out Community Broadband Bits for this week in order to see that. But Russ, like, you know, it seems to me like right now states have a lot of tools to be able to time this right.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools. There's a lot of money out there. That first round of ARPA is just now hitting the ground, you know, and so you're going to see these states start to allocate those funds. You know, like I said, California's got $6 billion. They got access to that now. You know, we can start moving that. That's before the $42 billion's been allocated by the feds, right? So there's states. I think a lot of states. I know Montana allocated $350 million. You know, Washington's done $350 million. You know, there's these states. $1 billion in North Carolina. You know, there's money in these states now, and they're trying to get that money allocated. And success is them spending money on quality product or projects. You know, so
let's hope so. I'm really worried that North Carolina. Doug will talk about this next week. I'm afraid that that's just going to be a big old check to Charter Spectrum. That's going to be ugly. I think.
Rumor has that may be true, which is a little unfortunate, I guess.
Chris, I like your idea. If you can put it in digestible, like even if you can just spread that out and create a recurring program, like to Russ's point, like who are the creditable providers who are providing service in that? And do you really know until basically you like go through 2 or 3 cycles of grant programs with that same provider and see if they were able to deliver in smaller chunks? And so that's how the states kind of, you know, built it is, hey, we've got a chunk of funding that comes up every 6 months and we're able to apply to it. And did this provider really go, you know, take this project and go do something cool with it? And it's great because now we've gotten in front of those guys and hopefully we've gotten enough of a reputation now where we've done a few projects and, you know, every time they see our name pop up for a grant request, they're like, well, those guys do a great job. Why don't we give them some money?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I want to comment on that because from this policy side, from the state side, one of the biggest challenges you have with that is these legislators are built on spending money, and success is the money they can move. You know, and if they allocate funds and they don't get spent, then it looks like it was a bad allocation of money. And that was one of my biggest challenges in Washington. I said, look, I'm not going to spend until I know exactly where it's got to go. You can give me $350 million, but we're going to do this in a way that we're going to do it methodically, you know, to where we can make sure we're getting that money to the right places. But legislatures are not set up that way. They're set up to, if I give you the money, otherwise I'm going to give it to somebody else who can spend it quicker and faster and use it today. And that unfortunately is kind of counterintuitive to what's got to happen.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. I ran through this with Minnesota, where you know we had these massive surpluses in the past. Now they seem tiny. Travis, I'm sure you're hoping you have a number of hopes. I mean, Minnesota is projecting a $7.7 billion surplus over the biennium, the next 2 years. Previously, we had like, you know, $1 billion, $2 billion. It seemed like an incredible amount. And so I said, take $300,000 out. And put that in the 6 years, $50,000. And the response I got back was, well, we can't do that because we can't bind future appropriations. And I was like, no, appropriate it, put it in an account, give them the authority to spend it over 3 years or 4 years rather than over 1 or 2 years. And they just like, there's a sense of like, you can't do that. And I'm like, you absolutely can do it. You just choose not to.
Right.
And yeah.
Well, and what happens when you take, you know, let's, like you're saying, I don't know, $32 million. And then you put that up for like a small company, like I would love the idea of taking all $32 million and go building projects, but that's probably not realistic for, you know, every small company out there, which we'd love those guys to go build the networks because they're the ones who are in touch with the community. And so I don't want so much money that, our operational standpoint, we're going to crash and burn. I want enough money that I can handle in project sizes so that I can go, in the next 6-month cycle, take the next, million or $10 million.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And not
let's
only
not
that, I mean, this is something John Chambers had proposed too for federal funds, which is to say it should be in smaller chunks, and you only get more money once you prove you've done a good job.
Amen.
And that just solves this issue we have with a company like LTD, where many of us have concerns about their ability to deliver. They and some people that I trust who are working with them say they do have an ability to deliver. Well, if they got it in small chunks, they'd be able to prove that, and then we would not have these worries.
Yeah.
We're going to have supply side challenges, and that supply side also falls on the labor side. We're all going to be trying to build here in these next 5 to 10 years. And so there's going to be a tremendous shortage. It's going to get nutty. And, you don't want to put haphazard networks out there. You want to make sure we're getting quality construction out there and make certain that we're allocating it equitably. So, there's got to be some thought to methodical spending of these funds.
So I just have to say that I've really appreciated the chat. There's a discussion about my documenting my eccentric style, unpredictableness. Travis,
I
any
did
last
see
questions?
something about a highlight reel.
Yeah. I absolutely think that would be wonderful for internal
Well,
use
I
only.
find it amazing, Chris, that in 1 hour we've come up with the Russ score, which is genius, right? So if the higher Russ score, the more money you get. That we're going to allocate dollars in small amounts, and you have to use those, prove that you use them successfully. I mean, what's the problem here? Maybe we should.
We need a backronym where someone takes RUSS and turns it into something that would make sense for the Russ score.
Yeah.
So I think we got this whole.
Be careful.
So how about we lobby?
Really useful scoring system.
There you go.
Let us
rural underserved service score.
Oh, there. Nailed it.
I'm telling you, the Russ score is the genius idea of the day. Well done, Russ.
That was yours, Travis.
And Casey, since you were here, you have a Russ score of 5. So
Right.
Yep.
I get grandfathered in.
Yep. I love it. Chris, since you're like the government guy here, why don't you go make that happen for us?
Yeah, I will start smoking the cigars in the back room so we can figure that out.
Well done.
This is I've really enjoyed this. I really appreciate your time, Russ and Casey. I look forward to bringing you back if I can find time between all of the shows with Reed on them. We have an exciting one show next week, and possibly I'm going to see if Kim and Doug are up for potentially doing one the week of Christmas Eve, week of Christmas, I guess, in which
say hi to Kim.
Excellent. Because next week I think we're going to do a ton of topics about stuff that's like going on in the more the what's happening lately. I kind of think it'd be interesting to do a retrospective show where my staff is working on a retrospective show for the Community Broadband Bits, in which everyone will have a chance to talk about sort of a key story that they thought was really good. I don't know if people get tired of those sorts of things, but I think it might be interesting to try and do a show of sort of like 2021, like what are the big stories, and reflecting on that a little bit. So if you have
Abe's onto something, Chris. We should also get some distributors in here to talk about what's going on in the supply chain, parts and pieces, bits and bobs.
I like that idea a lot. I've been on multiple panels with folks, and I have to say that the things that they answer those questions with are not super enlightening. But if Abe has ideas for who might be willing to talk about that in interesting ways, then I'm totally up for it.
Cool.
So, or Travis, if you have ideas too, like I'd love to.
It's interesting point. I don't know what we can talk about for an hour. Yes,
I talked about a deployer today about handholds, and he was just telling the same thing you were, Travis. And I'm like, why can't you just create another handhold factory? Like, I understand you can't spin up a fiber factory. Like, it takes many years to build that sense. But like building a handhold, like it's concrete, right? I mean, like maybe it's plastic, but like you should be able to like build it. And now that we know that there's going to be demand in Latin America after the United States finishes its builds, like. Why are we seeing shortages there?
Get anyone to work down at McDonald's. You think someone wants to deal with heavy concrete vaults? I mean, what was it? 11 million open jobs right now. The last one people want is making vaults. I'll tell you that. They're heavy.
Okay. I mean, I believe it, but we also have the Buy American stuff, which is going to complicate everything. Like, we need more things produced in the U.S. if they're gonna go by the statute. So, yeah. I mean, anyway, like I'm up for it. I don't have the ability to structure a good show on that right now with what I know.
Okay.
So anyway, we got Kim and Doug. We might have Kim and Doug again. We've got some really interesting people lined up for January that we're trying to find some good dates for. Obviously, Russ and Casey are gonna be welcome back. We might have to let Casey's boss come in because he's also really fun too. So really appreciate you guys making this such a great show. I am looking forward to future shows. We got a few more here, and then we'll take a little break. So thank you everyone for coming. This has been another episode of Connect This.